Hi, this is Brian Kim. I'm going to share with you episode number 3 in the surgical instrument review series, and we'll be reviewing the Katena Inamura cross-action Capsulorhexis Forceps, item number K5-5072. I did some work with Katena, and we were able to compile a kind of an ideal surgical cataract kit, and with that kit came this Inamura cross-action Capsulorhexis Forcep. And so I've had this forcep in my tray for a while, but I haven't really used it until now. And so this is the forcep. You can see it is a stainless steel one. You can see that it has a flat handle, and the flat handle is actually pretty nice because it does force you to keep your teeth straight up and down. So I think that's one of the things that I noticed when you're using this forcep. It does force you to keep the teeth up and down. I'm not quite used to this flat handle, and so I do prefer the rounded handle, but I do see how this could be beneficial to some surgeons. And it also has a sharp tip at the end, so you can puncture the capsule nice and easily here. So you can see I go in sideways, I puncture the center very easily without any force. I've already marked the cornea beforehand, and I'm able to very easily grab the edge of the tear and go ahead and make the flap. And so one of the things I notice, in contrast to the Haldi Percar, which is more kind of this scissor orientation to the forceps, this one is more like the tongs in the sense that there is a little bit of vertical component to them. However, because it's cross-action, the hinge is closer to the incision, and so it doesn't really seem to require as much gaping of the wound, and it's fairly easy to do the technique here. And so this is the end of the case. You can see I'm hydrating the incisions and have a perfectly sized and centered rhexis. So this is the next case with the same forcep. You'll see a series of cases here highlighting the Inamura forceps. So again, it is cross-action. It is more like the tong style versus the scissor style, but it is cross-action and towards the center, and as a result, the hinge is closer to the incision, which allows the forceps to be used so much more easily without significant viscoelastic egress and without gaping the incision. So you can see I'm puncturing the center. The sharp tip is really nice. Sometimes a tear doesn't come towards you, but you're able to just push down and direct the tear like I did there. I'm grabbing the right side of the tear and then going around circumferentially. One of the lovely things about these cross-action forceps, you can grab the capsule even though it's near your incision with very little difficulty and without causing any corneal stria, which can obscure your view. And you can see as I'm doing the rhexis, I have complete control. I'm able to make the rhexis without having to pull inward significantly. There's not a significant viscoelastic egress. I do think compared to the Haldi Parka, I do have to grab a little bit more. The forceps tips are a little bit shorter than the Haldi Percars. I do notice that. But you can see at the end of the case, a beautifully well-centered and sized rhexis. So this is the next case. I'm pushing some more viscoelastic. Really nice sized pupil here. Again, you can see the forceps pretty nicely. Again, nice sharp tips. You have to go in sideways. You can see the corneal mark that I made, which will be my guide. I'm going to puncture the center. Again, because of the sharp tip, it doesn't cause any traction or pushing down on the capsular bag at all. I'm able to pull down, sweep to the right to create a little bit of a flap, grabbing the right side of the tear. And I do that only when I'm ready to turn the tear into a flap. And once I do that, I'm able to use the corneal mark I made to guide the size and centration of the rhexis. I have really good control. I'm not having any significant viscoelastic egress. I'm not having any trouble with oarlocking or anything like that. Well controlled, able to grab the tear without any difficulty. The tips of the forceps are really nice. And then I finish it off here. So after the case is completed, you can see this is the IOL. You see 360 degrees of overlap and a perfectly centered and sized rhexis. Okay, this is the next case. Again, after I make my incisions, I push viscoelastic in. These are the forceps once again. So as I was saying before, because the handle is flat, it does force you to keep the teeth straight up and down. And so I think for some people that might be advantageous. Puncture the center. Once I get the tear to the right radius, I grab the right side of the tear to create a flap. By doing it this way, I have pretty good control, being able to determine the size of the rhexis. Doing it this way, I'm able to grab the tear easily with the tip of the forceps without any trouble, not having significant viscoelastic egress, not having a tendency for the rhexis to radialize or anything like that. It doesn't want to go outward. It's very nicely controlled rhexis. And this is the end of this case. After the lens is put in, you can see the rhexis is perfectly centered with 360 degrees of overlap of the IOL, and the case is completed. So this is the next case. It's the same thing. One thing I will say, this compared to the Healthy Percar, you've watched me review the Healthy Percar forceps, and one of the things I do like about it, the ends of the forceps are really, really long, and long in such a way that it's advantageous, and I'm able to open them really widely. And so I've noticed that's a little bit different from these. These open pretty widely too, but not nearly as widely as a Healthy Percar. And again, they're a little bit shorter. But nonetheless, I love the sharp ends of this forcep. I do appreciate how well controlled I'm able to make the rhexis. And I do believe, Inamura, either he developed or he popularized this cross-action forcep concept. And so these are excellent forceps, and I haven't had any trouble with them. And so this is the end of the case. You can see I'm hiding the incisions, and the lens is well centered in the capsular bag with 360 degrees of overlap of the rhexis and a nicely centered lens. And this is the next case. I got accustomed to pushing more viscoelastic before I do my rhexis to fill the anterior chamber. But really with these forceps, I'm not quite sure I really need to do that anymore because there's so much control with these forceps. So I puncture the center and push downward to, again, determine the size of the rhexis, grab the right side of the tear, creating the flap going around circumferentially, making sure I'm able to stay well centered and sized, following the corneal mark that I made before. And again, because of the flat handle, it forces you to rotate your hand within the incision without rotating in a torsional manner so that the teeth are not straight up and down. So I think that's good in the sense that it does force you to keep the teeth straight up and down, and probably less likely to get viscoelastic egress, and as a result, less tendency for the rhexis to run out. So I evacuated some bubbles there. I had my technician aspirate those bubbles. So this is the end of the case. The lens is in the bag, and you can see a well-centered and sized rhexis with 360 degrees overlap. Okay, this is another case, pushing some viscoelastic in, showing the actual forcep again, going in with the teeth sideways, puncturing the center, pulling down towards me. You can see the tear went a little bit to the left, but I'm able to guide it a little bit. Since the forceps tip are sharp, it's almost like a pick. I'm able to direct the tear fairly easily, even with the teeth closed. So again, the sub-incisional part can be a little bit of a challenge, but again, these forceps don't cause any significant corneal stria. I have good visualization, manipulating the flap even in the sub-incisional area. Again, the flat handle does force me to keep the teeth straight up and down. And I have really very good control of the rhexis with these forceps. So this is the end of the case. In this case, it's a 3-piece lens. You can see, again, the lens is well centered in the capsular bag with 360 degrees of overlap with the anterior capsule. And this is the next case. Again, I'm pushing some more of the viscoelastic through my paracentesis incision to fill the AC, go in with the teeth sideways, puncturing the center, pulling downward, sweeping to the right with the teeth closed, grabbing the right side of the tear once I've determined the radius or the size of the rhexis, going around circumferentially, following the corneal mark that I made to help me with the size and centration of the rhexis. Again, I don't have a significant worry of running out of the rhexis. I'm not constantly pulling inward like I used to with the Utrata style forceps. I'm not having a whole lot of viscoelastic coming out. An excellent forcep in my opinion. So this is the end of the case. Again, this is a 3-piece lens. Hydrating the incisions, you can see the lens is well centered. The Capsulorhexis was well centered as well with 360 degrees overlap. Another case, and again, these are cases that I did because I only have one of these forceps. I've had to do, we have 4 trays, I had to do this, use this forcep, once every 4th case. And so I had to compile these cases over several weeks. And so I'm just showing you each of those cases, consecutive cases, as I've tried these Inamura forceps. So again, I puncture the center, pull down, grabbing the right side of the tear, creating a flap, going around circumferentially. Again, you can appreciate the nuances, my control of the forcep, control of the rhexis, making sure I'm pivoting within the incision without pushing on the incision, pushing down or up on the incision. If you push down on the incision, you get wound gape. If you pull up a little bit, you'll cause the eye to rotate. And so this is the end of that rhexis and the end of the case. The lens is in the bag. Again, you can see the rhexis is well centered and sized with 360 degrees of overlap. And honestly, in my opinion, these forceps, the cross-action style forceps, are really the way to go in order to have maximum control of the rhexis. And so this is my trial and review of the Katena Inamura K5-5072 cross-action Capsulorhexis forceps with flat handles. Again, the benefits of the forceps, they have a nice sharp tip, punctures really easily, has flat handles which allow you to keep the forceps straight up and down. You're able to get exquisite control of the rhexis throughout the entire case, as long as you employ good technique. I had noticed I had minimal viscoelastic egress. I had very good control of the rhexis with minimal risk of run out of the rhexis, very controlled, and as a result, a well-centered and sized rhexis with 360 degrees of overlap in each of these cases. And in my opinion, this is an excellent choice if you wanted to choose a cross-action style forcep. But again, I also like the Haldey-Perkar primarily because it's much longer and the forceps teeth are able to open much more widely. And because of the scissor style design of the Haldey-Perkar, it's flatter within the incision, and as a result, I notice it causes less wound gape and therefore less corneal stria and distortion, especially when you're working in the incisional area. Again, because they're longer, I'm able to grasp the capsule with a lot of confidence and without having to try to grab and re-grab and not grabbing it correctly. But the biggest downside of the Haldey-Perkar is they don't have that sharp tip, and I do love the sharp tip on this Inamura Capsulorhexis Forcep. So I hope this was helpful to you, and I thank you for your attention.